Most people think their garden is done by August. They're wrong, and nowhere is that more true than with beets. Here's what nobody tells you. August isn't too late to plant beets. In most of this country, it's actually one of the best times. Not a backup plan, not a consolation prize, the best time. I learned that the way my grandmother learned it, and the way her mother learned it before her, not from a seed packet but from watching the land season after season, generation after generation. Our people were growing roots in this soil long before there were garden centers telling you spring was the only window. The earth doesn't read calendars. It reads temperature and daylight and moisture. And right now, in August, it's telling beets exactly what they want to hear. So if you've been standing in your garden this month feeling like you missed your shot, put that thought down. You didn't miss anything, you're right on time. Let's talk about why August actually works in the beet's favor, and not against it. Beets are a cool season root. That's the whole secret. They don't want blazing July heat while they're trying to swell underground. They want to start their life in warm soil, then finish it as the air cools down around them. Plant in August, and by the time your beets are sizing up in September and October, the nights are getting crisp. The sun is lower, and that's precisely the stress-free stretch a beetroot wants to grow fat and sweet in. Cold doesn't scare a beet. A hard freeze can settle over the ground, and that root just sits there underground, getting sweeter, not weaker. My elders used to say the frost is what wakes the sugar up in a root vegetable. There's truth in that. The plant senses the cold coming and starts converting its stored starches into sugars, almost like it's protecting itself, and that's exactly the flavor you want on your plate. Most beet varieties need somewhere between 50 and 70 days to reach a good harvest size. Count backward from your first expected frost date, and you'll see August lines up almost perfectly across most of the country. Even if a light frost catches your beets before you pull them, they'll shrug it off. Beets tolerate temperatures down into the 20s without much complaint. That's not something a tomato or a squash can say, so while your neighbors are pulling up dead vines in September, your beet bed is just getting started. Now, where you live changes the exact timing, and that's worth a moment before we move on. If you're up in the northern half of the country, early August is your window. You want those roots sizing up before the ground locks hard in December. If you're in the middle of the country, you've got until mid or even late August. And if you're further south, you can push beet seed into the ground clear through September, sometimes into October, because your first hard freeze is so much further off. The lesson underneath all of it is the same one my elders kept coming back to. Don't trust a date on a calendar over what your own ground and your own sky are telling you. Watch when the nights start cooling. Watch when the light starts changing angle in the late afternoon. The land gives you better information than any planting chart ever will, if you slow down enough to read it. There's also the matter of which beet you plant, because not every beet is the same beet. The deep red Detroit types are the ones most people picture. Reliable, sweet, good keepers through winter storage. But don't be afraid to branch out. Golden beets have a milder, almost honeyed flavor, and they don't bleed color into everything else on your cutting board the way red ones do. Chioggia beets, the ones striped pink and white on the inside like a target when you slice them, mature a little faster than most reds and bring some welcome variety to the bed. Planting a mix isn't just about variety for its own sake. It's insurance. If one type struggles with the particular weather this season brings, another might thrive, and you're not left with an empty harvest basket because you bet everything on one kind of seed. That's an old-school way of thinking about risk, long before anyone called it that. Never put all your trust in a single crop. Now, let's get into how to actually do this right, because there is a right way, and the old way is still the best way. Start with the soil, not the seed. That was always the first rule I was taught, and it still holds. Beets are root vegetables, which means they're pushing down through whatever you give them. If your soil is compacted, rocky, or full of clumps, that root is going to twist, split, or stop growing altogether. Work your bed down to at least a foot deep if you can manage it. Break up clumps by hand if you have to. Our people didn't have rototillers, and they still grew beautiful roots because they understood that loosening the ground with care matters more than the tool you use to do it. Mix in well-aged compost or composted manure before you plant. Not fresh manure that will burn tender roots and push the plant into growing leaves instead of a root. Aged is the word to remember. If you've got wood ash from a fire pit or a wood stove, work a light dusting of that into the bed too. That's an old trick, passed down for generations, and it still works because wood ash carries potassium, and potassium is exactly what a root crop needs to bulk up underground. Beets like soil that leans slightly acidic to neutral, right around 6 to 7 on the pH scale. Most garden soil already sits close to that range, so don't overthink it. If your soil is very acidic, a light hand of that same wood ash will nudge it back toward balance. Now the planting itself. Sow your beet seed about ½ an inch deep. Not deeper. Beet seeds are small, and if you bury them too far down, they'll use up their energy just trying to reach daylight and never make it. Space your seeds about an inch apart along the row, and give each row roughly 12 to 18 inches of breathing room from the next. Here's something a lot of new gardeners don't know. What looks like a single beet seed is actually a small cluster of seeds fused together inside one seed coat. That means from one seed you might get 2, 3, even 4 seedlings coming up in the same spot. This is where thinning becomes one of the most important steps in the whole process. And it's the step most people skip because it feels wasteful. Don't skip it. When your seedlings reach about 2 inches tall, thin them down so each remaining plant has 3 to 4 inches of space around it. If you crowd them, you'll end up with a patch of skinny, tangled, undersized roots instead of the big round beets you're picturing, and don't throw away what you thin out. Those tender baby greens are some of the best salad greens you'll ever eat. Nothing goes to waste. That was always the rule. You take what the earth gives you, and you use every part of it. Watering in August takes a little more attention than it would in a cooler month, simply because the ground is warmer and dries out faster. Beets want consistent moisture, about an inch of water a week, whether that comes from rain or from you. The word to hold on to is consistent. Long dry stretches followed by a heavy soaking will cause the roots to crack or grow woody and tough. A steady rhythm of watering produces a steady, tender root. If you can, water in the early morning. That was always the time my elders chose, before the heat of the day pulls the moisture straight back out of the ground, and it gives the leaves time to dry off before evening, which keeps disease away. A layer of mulch around your beet bed will do more work for you than almost anything else you can do in August. Straw, shredded leaves, even dried grass clippings. A couple inches spread around the plants holds moisture in the soil, keeps the ground temperature steadier through hot afternoons, and keeps weeds from competing with your beets for water and nutrients. This isn't a modern trick. Covering bare soil to protect it and hold its moisture is about as old as growing food itself. Sunlight matters too. Beets want at least 6 hours of direct sun a day, though in the tail end of summer heat, a little afternoon shade can actually help them along, easing the stress of the hottest part of the day while they still get plenty of light to grow strong. Before we talk about companions, let's talk about the small troubles that can show up along the way, because pretending pests don't exist doesn't make them go away. The most common one you'll see on beets is the leaf miner, a tiny insect that tunnels between the layers of a leaf and leaves behind pale, blotchy trails. It looks alarming, but it rarely threatens the root itself, only the leaves. If you catch it early, simply pinch off and remove the affected leaves before the insect spreads further through the patch. Aphids are the other visitor you might find clustered on the undersides of young leaves. A strong spray of water in the morning knocks most of them loose, and a light mix of water with a bit of mild soap handles the rest. No need to reach for anything harsher than that. My elders always said the healthiest plant is the one least bothered by pests in the first place, and that comes back to everything we've already covered. Good soil, steady water, proper spacing so air can move through the leaves. A stressed plant invites trouble. A well-tended one mostly wards it off on its own. Let's talk about companions in the garden, because nothing in a well-run garden grows entirely alone. Beets do well alongside onions, garlic, and members of the cabbage family. They don't compete hard for the same nutrients, and they can actually help shield each other from certain pests. What beets don't want nearby is pole beans. Something in that pairing stunts the beet's growth, and that's been observed and passed down long before anyone had a scientific name for why. Planting in relationship with what grows well beside it. That's not a new idea either. It's one of the oldest ideas in agriculture on this continent. The understanding that plants grown together in the right combination support each other rather than simply compete. Now, how do you know when it's time to pull them? Don't judge a beet by what you see above the ground. Judge it by feel. Once the shoulder of the root starts pushing up out of the soil, gently brush the dirt away and feel its width. You're looking for something between the size of a golf ball and a tennis ball, roughly 1.5 to 3 inches across. Smaller than that, and you're leaving flavor and size on the table. Bigger than that, and the root tends to turn woody and lose that tender sweetness. If you planted in early August, you're likely looking at a harvest window somewhere in late September through October, depending on your local frost timing. And remember, a light frost only improves the flavor, so there's no need to rush the harvest the moment the temperature dips. When you do pull them, don't twist the greens off right at the soil line. Cut the tops back, leaving about 1 inch of stem attached to the root. If you tear or cut too close, the beet will bleed out its color and moisture in storage and go soft faster than it should. That inch of stem seals it, the same way it always has. Storage is its own kind of knowledge, and it's one worth holding on to. Beets store beautifully through the cold months if you treat them right. Packed in slightly damp sand or sawdust, kept in a cool, dark space, they'll keep for months without a refrigerator at all. That's exactly how root cellars were used for generations before electricity ever touched a kitchen. There's a kind of self-reliance in that, a food source that doesn't depend on anything but a cool, dark corner and a little patience. And don't forget the greens. Beet greens are packed with nutrition and cooked down with a little fat and salt. They're every bit as good as the root itself. Nothing about this plant deserves to be wasted, not the thinnings, not the tops, not a single part of it. That's not just a gardening tip. That's a way of looking at what the earth gives you and choosing to honor all of it. If you fall in love with a particular beet this season, there's one more piece of old knowledge worth carrying forward: saving your own seed. A beet is a biennial, meaning it wants 2 full years to complete its cycle and flower. Leave a few of your strongest roots in the ground right where they grew, protected under a heavy layer of mulch through the winter, and the following year that plant will send up a tall seed stalk and produce seed of its own. Collect it, dry it, and store it somewhere cool and dark, and you'll be planting beets grown from your own garden's history rather than buying new seed every single year. That's how it was done for generations before seed catalogs existed at all. You kept what worked, and you passed it forward. Every packet of seed you buy today is really just somebody, somewhere, having done exactly that. It's also worth saying plainly why this crop deserves a place in your garden beyond just flavor. A beet is one of the most efficient things you can grow in a small space. It gives you 2 harvests from one planting, tender greens along the way, and a dense, storable root at the end. And it asks for very little in return. No elaborate structures to build, no delicate hand pollination, no babying through a heat wave. Just good soil, steady water, and the patience to let the season do its work. In a year when so much of what we eat comes from somewhere far away and changes hands a dozen times before it reaches a plate, there's real value in a vegetable you can grow yourself, store yourself, and rely on through the coldest months without asking anyone else for a thing. That kind of self-sufficiency was never a trend for the people who came before us. It was simply how you lived and how you made sure your family ate well no matter what the winter brought. So here is the truth to carry with you into your garden this week. August is not the end of your growing season. For beets, it might be the real beginning. Loosen your soil with care. Feed it something aged, not raw. Plant that seed half an inch deep, an inch apart, and have the patience to thin what comes up. Water it steady, mulch it well, and let the first frost do what it's always done. Sweeten what it touches instead of destroying it. This is knowledge that outlived the people who first learned it, because it was shared generation to generation instead of kept quiet. So go plant your beets. You're not behind. You're exactly on time, and the ground is waiting for you.